So last year, I asked in a video if microneedles were the answer to blood glucose monitoring. And the answer appears to be a resounding yes. Now that San Diego-based Biolink has received the Novo FDA clearance for their microneedle blood glucose wearable, Shine. So, well done. Congratulations to them. And so in this video, we're going to talk about Shine, what it is and what it does. And we're going to break down what we know and what we don't yet know about it. So hi folks, welcome back to the channel. Hope everybody is happy and healthy and getting out there to exercise. Disclaimer before we dive into things. I have no association with Biolink. I have no inside information. This video is based entirely on publicly available information and my general knowledge. And with that, for starters, this is what Biolinq Shine looks like from the top and from the bottom. It's a small disc that you attach to your underarm, as I discussed in my 2024 video that I will attach a link to in the description below. The bottom of this device has tiny, tiny needles that measure analytes in the dermis, so your skin. The needles are only about 1/4 of a millimeter long, way too short to reach the subcutaneous tissue that requires needles that are about 5 millimeters long, which is what Dexcom and Abbott uses in their glucose sensors or wearables. If you're interested in Biolink's approach and why they prefer to measure in the dermis versus the subcutaneous tissue, that's something that I discussed in the 2024 video. Now the top of Shine is different from the other devices because it has a color indicator that will change color based on the wearer's blood glucose levels. I believe there's 2 colors, blue for blood glucose that is within range, yellow for above range, and I'm not sure if it can detect blood glucose levels which are low, which has some implications as we're going to discuss in a minute. Because of the color indicator, you can use it standalone without a phone, and I actually think that's very cool because it enables the user to be able to directly in their mind correlate what's happening to their blood glucose to what they've done, what they've eaten, what they've drunk, and whatnot. And so you can intuitively try to make sense out of things. There is an accompanying phone app that we are told will provide additional information and will seek to relate or maybe even correlate blood glucose levels to activity, sleep, maybe nutrition. We've not seen the prototype, so we'll have to see what the app is and what it does. Now, with regards to the FDA approval, the company can start selling Shine right away as soon as they have units to sell, so manufacturing and distributors. Now, FDA approvals of drugs and devices are, as you would imagine, very specific, and Shine is no exception. So we're going to take a look at the FDA approval letter. Here is an excerpt of the beginning of the letter. And the first thing that stands out is that this is a prescription device, meaning you will need a prescription from your physician, just as you would for a drug to be able to get it. Excuse me. That, of course, also limits where you'll be able to get the device because it can only be distributed by regulated pharmacies. The flip side is that it might be covered by health insurance, which is a good thing. And of course, because it is an FDA-approved device, you will also be able to use your health saving account money to pay for it outright if your insurance doesn't cover it, or to pay for copays and deductibles if it does. So to be clear, not an over-the-counter device that any of us can just go out and buy right off the bat. Second, as is always the case of FDA-approved devices and drugs, it is approved for a specific indication and a specific population. And here some of you may actually be disappointed by the initial approval. Hopefully, Biolink will conduct additional clinical trials and will seek additional approvals down the road. For the time being, however, the initial approval is very specifically for persons 22 years or older not on insulin. So that clearly excludes people with type 1 diabetes who will be on insulin because their bodies cannot produce insulin, and people with type 2 diabetes who are using external insulin. Notably, it does not exclude people who are healthy, who just want to know what their blood sugar levels are. So who is this device for initially? Well, it looks to me like the initially intended population is people with insulin resistance, whose insulin resistance is not yet so severe that they need to be on insulin. So in other words, people with pre-diabetes, right? Can a physician prescribe it to healthy people or people with diabetes who are using insulin? They could. The way things work in the US is that physicians have very broad discretion when it comes to writing prescriptions for drugs and medical devices beyond the approved label or indication. It's called off-label prescribing. And the thing about the approved label is that more than anything else, it restricts the claims that the company can make in its marketing collateral and sales pitches. It does not restrict physicians' prescribing abilities. So that's the US law, for better or worse. That said, the issue with people who need external insulin using a device that records blood sugar levels somewhere else other than directly from the blood is, of course, the time delay between seeing glucose in the blood and it showing up somewhere else. Delay that could be anywhere from 15 to 45 minutes as best we can tell. And obviously, you would not want to be dosing insulin based on information that is sort of 15 to 45 minute old. And I think that's sort of the rub here. In addition, as I've mentioned before, it's not clear to me if Shine can in fact detect low blood sugar levels, and therefore that would be problematic for people with type 1 diabetes for obvious reasons. So for those of you who are hoping that this will be an over-the-counter device that doesn't require a prescription, there are two hopeful signs. The first one is that you might recall that both Dexcom and Abbott first received approvals and launched their respective sensors, their respective wearables, as prescription devices. And they have now received approval to sell them as over-the-counter. So that is a well-trodden path in terms of transitioning prescription drugs and devices to over-the-counter drugs and devices. And hopefully Biolink will follow a similar path down the road. The second hint is that Biolink's CEO, Richard Yang, is reported to have said that Shine's price won't be too far apart, it's a direct quote, from Abbott's Lingo or Dexcom Stelo. Now, those are the over-the-counter versions of Dexcom and Abbott's prescription devices. So it's definitely interesting that he's comparing or thinking about his pricing relative to Dexcom's and Abbott's over-the-counter devices. And a good sign for us all, potentially. For reference, by the way, a pack of 2 Stelo wearables, each of which is good for about 15 days, costs $99 here in the US. There are some discounts if you sort of subscribe for a longer period of time. And 2 Lingo sensors, which also last about 15 days each, cost about $89 in the US. So that's apparently somewhere in the range where Biolink is looking to be. The thing that we don't know about Shine at this point in time is how long it lasts, how often it has to be replaced. Both the Dexcom and the Abbott devices last for about 15 days. This is determined by the amount of reagent that they can hold, because they're sort of devices that analyze body liquids, right? Shine likewise is a device that analyzes body liquids and therefore will need reagents. And so once again, the question for how long it lasts is simply a question of how much reagent it uses and how much reagent it can contain. TBD, we don't know at this point in time. We also don't know how well it will hold up for exercise, whether it's running, swimming, or that like. We'll have to wait and see. As to when it might be available, my understanding is that Biolink is trying to get it to market in early 2026. They're currently looking for manufacturing capabilities and distribution. The good news is that they do have the money to make it happen, as well as for additional clinical trials. They raised $58 million in April of 2024 in a Series B. They've raised another $100 million in April 2025 in a Series C. And in total, they've raised $370 million. So certainly a well-funded and financed company. They have also discussed expanding the capabilities of their, what they call platform, to other metabolites, whether it's lactate, ketones, as well as to be able to track muscle wasting for people on GLP-1 drugs and, of course, potentially, other things. So stay tuned, but it does look very promising and very exciting, and I can totally see how they should be able to do that. It'll be interesting to see if they can do it all in one single device. It would be a bit of a nuisance to need to have multiple devices. So, to be determined. So, that's what we know so far. Great progress. Congratulations to them. Look forward to seeing it in the market sooner rather than later. And with that, be well. We'll talk soon. Take good care, folks. Bye-bye.